Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. The Chechen Wars were a series of armed conflicts that occurred between the Russian Federation and the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, a self-proclaimed independent state located in the Northern Caucasus region of Russia. The conflicts took place in two main phases, from 1994 to 1996, and from 1999 to 2009. The wars had far-reaching consequences for both the Russian Federation and the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, resulting in thousands of deaths, destruction of infrastructure, displacement of civilians, and a legacy of mistrust and animosity between the two sides. The First Chechen War was fought between the Russian Federation and the self-proclaimed independent state of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. The conflict began in December of 1994 when Russian troops invaded Chechnya in an attempt to restore federal control over the region. The Russian military initially encountered stiff resistance from Chechen fighters who employed guerrilla warfare tactics and had a knowledge of the local terrain which they used to their advantage. The conflict resulted in a protracted and bloody battle, with both sides suffering significant casualties. The First Chechen War was characterized by indiscriminate and widespread use of force by the Russian military, as well as gruesome executions performed on prisoners of war by Chechen militants. Russian forces bombed and shelled civilian areas, resulting in significant civilian casualties. The conflict also saw the widespread use of torture, extrajudicial killings, and other human rights violations by both sides. In 1996, following a ceasefire agreement, Russian forces withdrew from Chechnya and the conflict officially ended. However, the ceasefire was not a permanent solution for the conflict. Essentially, the withdrawal of Russian troops left a power vacuum in Chechnya, which led to the emergence of various armed groups vying for control over the region. The lack of a stable government in Chechnya, coupled with the lingering grievances of the Chechen people, paved the way for the Second Chechen War. The Second Chechen War began in August of 1999 when Chechen militants infiltrated the neighbouring region of Dagestan and launched an attack on a Russian military base. This attack was followed by a series of terrorist bombings in Moscow and other Russian cities, which were attributed to Chechen militants. Russian authorities responded by launching the second invasion of Chechnya, with the stated goal of eradicating terrorism and restoring federal control over the region. The Second Chechen War was a more brutal and intense conflict than the first. The Russian military employed heavy artillery, airstrikes, and ground assaults to target Chechen fighters and civilian areas. Chechen militants, for their part, continued to use guerrilla tactics and targeted attacks on Russian military. Chechen militants, for their part, continued to use guerrilla tactics and targeted attacks on Russian military and government targets. The second conflict resulted in significant civilian casualties, with estimates ranging from tens of thousands to over 100,000 dead. The Second Chechen War also saw a proliferation of human rights abuses, with both sides accused of torture, extrajudicial killings, and other violations. Once again, the Russian military was particularly criticized for its use of indiscriminate force against civilian areas and for its brutal treatment of Chechen civilians suspected of supporting the militants. In 2003, Russia installed a pro-Moscow government in Chechnya, which brought a degree of stability to the region. However, the conflict continued to simmer, with sporadic violence and human rights abuses on both sides. In 2009, Russian authorities declared an end to their military campaign in Chechnya, citing the establishment of a stable government and the restoration of federal control over the region. The Chechen Wars had far-reaching consequences for both the Russian Federation and the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. The conflicts resulted in significant human suffering, including civilian casualties, displacement, and the destruction of infrastructure. The wars also contributed to the rise of extremism and terrorism in the Northern Caucasus region. Although the region is more stable today under the leadership of Ramzan Kadyrov, there is still an underground desire for separatism and independence. Violence has reduced in recent years, however, this may change in the distant future, depending on the region's political stability. The Chechen Wars were incredibly brutal. In fact, for the period from 1994 to 2003, estimates ranged from 50,000 to 250,000 civilians, and 10 to 50,000 Russian servicemen were killed. The conflict also marked the use of brutal propaganda footage, particularly by the Chechen rebels. Of course, war zone content is never pretty, but the Chechen Wars arguably started the trend of recorded war zone executions and war crimes. Here in the West, if you're old enough, I'm sure you vividly remember the coverage of both the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. One of the defining memories of the Iraq War in particular was the haunting images of the prisoners of war who were dressed up in the orange jumpsuits. Many speculate this was to replicate the prisoners held in Guantanamo Bay. News stations reported on the capture of hostages such as Nick Berg, Eugene Armstrong, and Kenneth Bigley in Iraq. For days, reports suggested potential ongoing negotiations would eventually lead to the release of the captives. However, on all occasions, the negotiations failed, and the hostages were executed by beheading, all on camera, and subsequently uploaded online. As the news reported on the incidents, many people would then scour the net in order to find the gruesome videos. For many people, the Iraq War tickled their morbid curiosity, and for many, it was the first time they were aware of the true depravity available on the internet. Sites such as Ogrish and Rotten.com at the time would be the go-to place for such content. The Iraq War, essentially by proxy, highlighted the topic of online gore videos to the masses. Before 2003, shock videos involving scat and other despicable acts were making the rounds online, but the topic of gore was far more taboo, and the online community surrounding it was relatively small. Many assume that videos from the Iraq War essentially started the online gore trend. However, such videos were available online long before the war in Iraq, and Afghanistan for that matter. The first, and especially the Second Chechen War, would go on to be a hotbed for such content. Chechen rebels, as well as utilising brutal guerrilla warfare tactics, also used psychological warfare to demoralise and scare Russian troops. One such tactic that they would use would be to execute captured Russian soldiers and then record the murder. They would then leave the videotape on the body for Russian soldiers to then find. Notable videos from the conflicts are considered by some to be OG gore videos, such as Chechnya, which is a short beheading video believed to have taken place in 1996, though some do dispute this claim. Many speculate that it may have been the first beheading video to be uploaded online, though again, such claims are unsubstantiated. There are also rumours suggesting that a longer version of the video may be available, or at least used to exist, and some sources do support this claim. Another piece of notable content to come out of the conflict would be the infamous Dagestan Massacre video, which, in my opinion, is one of the worst war crime videos available online. The clip depicts the murder of 6 Russian prisoners of war by Chechen rebels. 5 have their throats slit and are left to bleed out as they writhe around on the floor as the life fades from their bodies, and another captive is gunned down as he tries to run away from his captors. The backstory surrounding the Dagestan Massacre, also known as the Chechnya Massacre, is interesting. The murders took place on the 5th of September 1999, however, the film was actually discovered at some point in the year 2000 by Russian authorities. The Russian security service found the tape on sale in a market in Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. It is believed that many similar execution videos would be traded and sold in Chechnya at the time, which does beg the question, how many videos are out there depicting similar acts that never found their way online, or that never ended up in the hands of authorities? The topic of lost media is synonymous with the Chechen War. I certainly wouldn't be shocked if there are some gruesome unseen recordings on a VHS tape, somewhere in a basement in Chechnya, gathering dust, either waiting to be discovered, or waiting to be lost to time. Which brings us to the topic of today's video, the murder of Tatiana Usmanova. The case was brought to my attention by a subscriber who stumbled across the video online. The case is interesting, as despite the age of the video, it only appears to have been uploaded online recently. It may have been available online way back when, but from my research, it appeared to have vanished after a period of time, which garnered the video to have a reputation of being rare. In recent weeks, the video has once again made the rounds online. It is considered to be one of the last known recorded executions of the Second Chechen War. In October of 2021, 32-year-old Tatiana Usmanova was abducted from her home together with her husband and a friend by pro-Chechen militants who were fighting for Chechnya's independence from Russia at the time. According to information available online, Tatiana was accused by her captors to have cooperated with state agencies, including the police. Tatiana was murdered on camera, and her friend was shot dead off camera. The rebels allowed Tatiana's husband to live, as he was of Chechen descent. However, he was tortured, and they killed his wife in front of him. News reports also cite that the couple may have had up to 4 to 5 children. All of the killers, except the cameraman, were really young, around 18 years old at the time. It's said that the footage of the crime did not become public until 2004. By that time, most of the attackers in the video were already dead. The names of the attackers were also published on some internet blogs. The cameraman was identified as Kamzat Tazabayev, nicknamed Tariq and born in 1974, and the 3 killers were identified as Arbi Kashkanov, Adlan Barayev, and Ilyas Dashayev. Ilyas Dashayev was the only person convicted of the crime. He told the police that they finally got rid of the bodies by throwing them into a river. For the 2001 murders, Ilyas Dashayev was convicted in 2007 by the Supreme Court of the Chechen Republic and was sentenced to 22 years in prison, with serving a sentence in a maximum security penal colony. He was serving time in an IR-1 colony in the Chelyabinsk region of Russia. Controversy sparked in 2018 after another prisoner of the IR-1 colony, Yevgeny Kidinov, was beaten to death on the 11th of November of that year. One of the accused was Ilyas Dashayev. Ilyas's wife, Ramisa, claimed that the new charge of murder was only based on 2 eyewitness reports from fellow prisoners, claiming that they were involved in drug trafficking in the IR-1 colony, and that they got into conflict with Ilyas Dashayev, who was openly against the drug use among the prisoners. She insinuates that they made the witness reports as retribution against Ilyas. Further details in regards to the outcome of the additional case are unknown. The 3 victims of the kidnapping and torture were Tatiana Usmanova, her husband, Hassan Edilgariv, and their neighbour, Elena Petrovna Gavshkaya. Tatiana and Hassan were living in the Andriivskaya Dolina village in the Zavodsky district of Grozny. In the evening of the 1st of October 2001, Elena, a friend of Tatiana, paid a visit to the couple. According to Hassan, 5 armed militants broke into their home. They were part of a group led by notable Chechen rebel Islam Shalayev. After the break-in, the victims were then said to be transported to Islam Shalayev's house in Alkankala, which is where Tatiana and her friend were eventually murdered. As mentioned previously, every perpetrator apart from Ilyas Dashayev were killed before they could face justice. In the middle of 2004, police in Grozny obtained a tape that contained footage of the torture and murder of Tatiana. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual video? The video is a long one, at 17 minutes and 55 seconds in length. Despite the age of the recording, the quality is surprisingly good, and it appears that the camera used had some sort of night setting. The video almost looks like it was shot with some sort of night vision filter. The location of the gruesome murder is that of what appears to be a dark, dingy basement. As you play the video, you see Tatiana sitting on the floor. She looks disheveled and has clearly been beaten by her captors. She is interrogated throughout the first 2 minutes of the video, and occasionally is whipped with some sort of flexible stick. You also see Tatiana's husband in the background as she is being interrogated by the militants. Despite the situation, Tatiana remains extremely calm during the interrogation. After a couple of minutes, one of the militants can be seen digging a shallow hole. It isn't a grave, but an area for blood to collect. As he is digging the hole, the cameraman intermittently switches to showing Tatiana's face, which has a look of hopelessness and dejection. At around 4 minutes in, one of the interrogators starts to speak to Tatiana in a more aggressive tone, and the gravity of the situation is starting to sink in for her. Her responses are more fast-paced and panicked. She then starts to plead with her captors as they ask her to show her hands so that they can be taped together. The video then jump cuts, this time showing Tatiana's husband having tape placed over his mouth. Tatiana then has her mouth taped as she is laying on the ground. One of the militants then places the blade of a combat knife on her neck, almost as a practice run, and getting used to where to cut. The look on Tatiana's face at this point is pure terror. At around 6 minutes in, the video jump cuts, once again showing Tatiana, but the tape has been removed from her face and she talks softly as she lays on the ground. It's unclear as to what she says to her attackers. At around 8.5 minutes into the video, she once again has tape placed around her mouth as her kidnappers prepare for her execution. At 9 minutes into the video, the militants place her on her side, next to the freshly dug hole. One man can be seen holding her head back, exposing her neck, while the other places the blade under her chin and he begins to slice. As the blade cuts through her throat, she makes a light shrieking noise. As the knife cuts through her flesh, you see the blood leak into the hole. The cameraman, Kamzat Tazabayev, can be heard giggling like a child as Tatiana is having her throat slit. The knife is very sharp, and after only 10 seconds or so, Tatiana appears lifeless. Another man then takes the knife and starts cutting Tatiana at the side of her neck. The beheading is completed off camera. The video then jump cuts, and for a minute or so, the screen is black and you hear the killers talking amongst each other. The video then shows Tatiana's husband talking to the camera for a few seconds. He has been badly beaten and his head is covered in lumps and lacerations. The video then shows Tatiana's decapitated corpse as the cameraman walks around it as he laughs. One of the killers then holds the head up to the camera as he smiles, and the cameraman once again laughs. The scene is very disturbing. You see the killer's eyes glow due to the camera light as he holds the head up. They then show the decapitated head a few more times as it is placed on the floor. The remaining few minutes of the video is the killers talking to Tatiana's husband. He watched his wife get murdered before him, and they grill him with questions. He answers them to the best of his ability, but he looks spaced out and in shock due to what he has just seen. The whole video is extremely eerie and unsettling. As mentioned, I'm not sure if this was previously online or whether this has only just made the rounds recently. Articles state that the video was made public in 2004, however, I can't find any copies of the video online before the last couple of weeks. Regardless, for the longest time, it was classified as a rare gore video, though that is no longer the case. Ultimately, this just proves as yet another example of the true brutality of war, and, in particular, the Chechen Wars. Wars renowned for guerrilla warfare tactics, war crimes, and the publication of recorded executions. But anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it, if you can enjoy this sort of content. I thought this case was a little bit different from the recent videos I've made. I've not touched on the Chechen Wars for quite some time now, and I would like to make more content surrounding war and wars going forwards. So of course, stay tuned for that. But once again, thank you guys for all of the support that you continue to show me. I mean, we've been going strong ever since I started this channel, which is coming up to 2 years, early May, so again, I want to thank you guys for all of the encouragement, all of the support, the likes, the views, the shares, everything. It really is appreciated, so thank you guys so much. You guys are absolute legends, what more can I say? As always, if you have any case recommendations, the best place to find me would be my Twitter. Drop me a follow, drop me a DM if you have any cases in mind. I can certainly look at them at least. So if you have any ideas, always feel free to get in touch. And also in the pinned comment will be a link to my Twitch channel. And I have to say, I have kind of caught the streaming bug recently. I've really been enjoying Twitch. So check that out. I usually stream every Friday after the video has premiered. So come and check us out. Come and check us out. But anyway, as always, stay safe. And I'll catch you on the next one.